Hey guys, you're watching Diary of Betrayal. Things are about to get crazy. Are you ready to dive into shocking stories of cheating and betrayal? Let's go.
Kevin stood by the window, watching the fine, cold rain tap against the glass. Twilight was settling outside, the gray clouds blending with the asphalt. He usually loved evenings like this, perfect for brewing strong tea, wrapping himself in a blanket, and reading a book. But tonight, something unsettled him. His wife, Sarah, was late from work for the third time this week, and each excuse sounded less convincing than the last. The meeting ran late, she had said during yesterday's conversation. The director decided to discuss new projects. Back then, Kevin had merely nodded, not asking unnecessary questions. But now, those words echoed in his mind. When they first married, Sarah was the embodiment of warmth and joy. She always made time for their family, and their son, Victor, grew up surrounded by love and care. But in recent months, something had shifted. Sarah seemed to live in her own world, absorbed by her phone, laughing at hidden messages, and punctuated by rare outbursts of unfounded irritation. Kevin started noticing how her gaze became distant, her smile artificial. The sound of the kettle whistling came from the kitchen. Kevin shook himself from his thoughts and went to pour some tea. As he stirred sugar into his mug, a recent conversation with his father-in-law surfaced in his memory. "Now, Kev," Arthur Peterson had said with a slight tone of reproach, "don't forget that Sarah always needs a bit of excitement. She's a vibrant woman, and your seriousness can bore her sometimes. But you hang in there. Family is what matters most." Kevin had only smirked at the time. Arthur always had a way of veiling his doubts. But now, those words took on a new, ominous meaning. The clock struck 7. Kevin's phone vibrated on the table. He quickly picked it up, hoping to hear his wife's voice. Instead, it was Victor calling from his grandmother's phone. "Dad, is Mom coming home soon?" "Grandma and I already had dinner." "Soon, buddy," Kevin replied, trying to keep his voice steady, though anxiety churned within him. "You go to bed early, okay? School tomorrow." "Okay." After Victor hung up, Kevin sat for a long time, staring at the phone. He suddenly felt cold. His intuition told him this was far more serious than he could imagine. He opened the closet and pulled out a dark blue sweater Sarah had given him for their anniversary. This sweater was her favorite, and she always seemed pleased when she saw him wearing it. Did she love me? The thought flickered through his mind. Sarah returned home around 10. Entering the apartment, she tossed her keys onto the side table and froze when she saw Kevin in the living room. He wasn't asleep. He sat in the armchair with a book, but his gaze was fixed directly on her. "Why aren't you asleep?" Her voice sounded guilty. "Just waiting," he answered curtly. Sarah quickly crossed the room, pretending to be in a hurry to take off her shoes. Her fingers fumbled with the laces, and Kevin couldn't help but notice how her hands trembled. "Tough day. MHM. Sarah didn't even look up. "Tomorrow will be even harder." Something happened. He feigned interest, but the question was a test. "Oh, nothing special." She finally raised her head, meeting his gaze. "Just a lot of work." Kevin didn't press further. He knew any answers would be lies, but something inside him broke. This woman, whom he loved and trusted, had suddenly become a stranger. And that night, he understood. If the truth existed, he would find it. And then, no one would go unpunished. The next morning, Kevin felt drained. A sleepless night filled with heavy thoughts had left shadows of fatigue on his face and a heavy lump in his heart. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, but Sarah's strange behavior increasingly challenged his trust. To distract himself, he decided to do some chores. While loading the washing machine, Kevin came across Sarah's coat, which she had carelessly tossed onto a chair upon returning yesterday. Her usual untidiness, once endearing, now irritated him. A phone fell out of the coat pocket. Kevin froze. He knew that prying into someone else's phone was a low and unworthy act. But an inner voice whispered, "You have to know the truth. If you're afraid to hear it, it will consume you from within." He picked up the phone and saw the screen was lit. The battery was about to die. Should he give in to temptation? It's just a coincidence, he thought, as a notification from a messaging app popped up. It read, "Leo M. Thanks for last night. You were amazing. Kevin slowly sank onto the nearest chair. His heart pounded so loudly he was sure even the neighbors could hear it. He looked at the screen again to make sure he hadn't misread. The notification blinked and disappeared, but the message remained seared into his mind like a burn. Leo Maxwell, he said aloud. The name was familiar. Sarah's director, a man oozing overconfidence, always surrounded by laughing women at corporate events. Kevin had always considered him a shallow person, someone for whom the word morality was absent from his vocabulary. But until today, he couldn't have imagined he was capable of going this far. Sarah's phone lay on the table, as if offering itself for further inspection. Kevin wrestled with himself. Pick up the device or leave things as they were. You've already gone too far, he told himself, and decided to open her messages. It was one of the hardest moments of his life. Reading someone else's correspondence felt as unpleasant as wading through a dirty puddle. There was nothing in Leo's and Sarah's messages that could be justified. Beyond the usual jokes and emojis, there were phrases filled with ambiguity and sometimes direct hints. One of the latest, "My cabin is cozy. You like it? How about Saturday?" Kevin's hands clenched into fists. Sarah's words replayed in his head. "The meeting ran late. Work, you know." Now, these words sounded like mockery. Every sentence in their exchange was like a slap in the face. She had been lying to him while he defended her to everyone, believing their family was strong. At some point, he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Putting the phone aside, he realized he needed to act calmly. It was too soon for loud declarations and confrontations. But he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't an accidental misunderstanding. This was betrayal. He put the phone back in her coat pocket. He couldn't have her noticing someone had looked at her messages. A plan was already forming in his mind. If she decided to go to that cabin, he would follow her. He needed not only to confirm his suspicions, but also to gather irrefutable evidence. Around lunchtime, Sarah appeared at home as if nothing had happened. She was wearing a new coat and a light scarf that emphasized her slender neck. Kevin watched her attentively, but tried not to show his emotions. She hugged him with a smile, which seemed almost mocking after everything he had discovered. "How are you?" she asked, looking into his eyes. "Fine, a bit tired. And you?" Kevin tried to remain calm. "Oh, it's so hectic at work," Sarah replied. "You should see how they're loading us with new projects." He just nodded, unwilling to start a conversation. Sarah's words now seemed as fake as plastic flowers. They looked beautiful, but there was no life in them. When she left the house again in the evening, under the pretext of meeting a friend, Kevin made a firm decision. If she's lying, I'll find out. Gathering his thoughts, he began to figure out how to verify her words. He wasn't going to waste his life on lies. From now on, every step Sarah took would be under his observation. A week passed, but Kevin's thoughts about Sarah's strange behavior and her messages with Leo Maxwell didn't leave him. Her escapades became more and more obvious. She would disappear until late or remain silent when he asked her direct questions. A tense gleam appeared on her face, like someone leading a double life. Kevin became increasingly convinced he had to act. On Friday evening, when Sarah, as usual, announced an urgent meeting at work, he realized this was his chance. Kevin waited until she left. Then he quickly grabbed his jacket, slipped his phone with a newly installed location tracking app into his pocket, and left the house. He wanted to make sure Sarah was really going where she said she was. Where to whom? It was cold outside. The snow crunched underfoot, and the wind chilled him to the bone. Kevin followed his wife's trail at a short distance, trying not to attract attention. She hailed a cab at the corner, and he managed to note the car's number. Quickly summoning another car via an app, he told the driver, "Follow that yellow sedan, but keep your distance." Sarah's car headed towards the city exit. Kevin clutched his phone, watching the dot on the map move along the highway. His heart was racing. He tried to suppress his anger and pain, focusing on the facts. He had to be sure before making any accusations. After half an hour, the car turned onto an access road to a gated community. Kevin asked the driver to stop. "I'll go on my own from here." He walked along the road, trying not to make any noise. Ahead, behind a fence, stood a spacious house with large windows from which warm light poured. The same yellow sedan was parked by the gate. Sarah got out of the car, adjusted her hair, and walked towards the door, which Leo Maxwell opened for her. He stood in a dark blazer, smiling too broadly. He held a glass of wine in his hand. "Welcome, beautiful," Kevin heard his voice. Sarah laughed. That laugh, which he had loved so much, now sounded like a knife scraping glass. Kevin stood in the shadow of the trees, watching them. He felt rage boiling inside him, but held himself back. He knew an emotional outburst wouldn't help now. He needed to gather evidence, so her lies couldn't be twisted. After some time, music started playing in the house. Sarah and Leo, glasses in hand, crossed the spacious living room and sat on a soft sofa. Their conversation was indistinct, but their gestures and glances made everything clear. Kevin took out his phone and took several pictures. The photos were cold, hard evidence. It was difficult for him to see Sarah smiling, leaning closer to Leo. Her face seemed so sincere that for a moment, Kevin felt a chill of fear. Had he been living all this time with someone who could lie so well? An hour passed, but Kevin remained in the shadows, knowing this was only the beginning. At one point, Leo leaned towards Sarah, and she didn't pull away. On the contrary, she responded by touching his hand. Kevin closed his eyes as if that could erase what he had seen. Returning home late at night, he sat in the dark for a long time, not turning on the lights. The pictures he had taken screamed the bitter truth, a truth impossible to ignore. This wasn't just infidelity. It was a betrayal of all their years together, all the promises they had made to each other. The next morning, Sarah returned home, looking tired. She clearly hadn't expected Kevin to be waiting for her in the kitchen with a cup of coffee. He looked at her intently. "How was work?" he asked, trying to keep his voice even. "Exhausted," she replied, averting her gaze. "But everything's fine." He nodded, feeling anger burning inside him. She was lying to his face without even blinking. "That's good," he said, his voice icy beneath the words. "I'm sure things will get even better soon." These words were his first step in the plan he was beginning to construct in his mind. Now he knew he had to act. He couldn't wait any longer. Kevin sat in his car by the river, a place he always went when he needed to be alone with his thoughts. Trees lined the bank, covered in a thin layer of frost. The water lapped peacefully, a sound that usually calmed him. But today, no natural harmony could extinguish the fire in his soul. He tried to gather his thoughts, but they scattered like frightened birds. The photos he'd taken at Leo's house flashed before his eyes again and again. Sarah's smile, her laugh, her touch on another man's hand. It all caused a pain that felt physical. How could she? The question echoed in his head. He remembered all their happy moments, from their first date to the birth of their son. Victor was everything to Kevin. He had always believed their family was a fortress, impossible to destroy. But now, it all seemed like fragile glass, shattered into 1,000 pieces. Sarah was home, acting as if nothing was wrong. She chatted on the phone with her friend Kate, laughing occasionally. Kevin heard her from the bedroom, where he was trying to pack his gym bag. Her laughter now sounded fake, like a recording on an old tape. He couldn't listen to her voice without feeling revulsion. When she finished her call and entered the room, he was already standing by the window, clutching his car keys. "Where are you going?" she asked, slightly surprised. "To the gym," he replied dryly, without turning around. Sarah came closer, as if wanting to say something, but then changed her mind. Kevin felt her presence, but couldn't look at her. "Everything okay?" Her voice was soft, almost caring. He remained silent for a few seconds before answering. "Everything's perfect, Sarah. Absolutely perfect." His words, spoken with a hint of sarcasm, made her freeze. She didn't continue the conversation, turned, and went to the kitchen. As soon as Kevin reached the gym parking lot, he realized that a workout wouldn't help today. He needed to talk to someone, but whom? Arthur Peterson, his father-in-law, had always supported their family, but opening up to him meant starting a war in their relationship. His mother-in-law, Nancy, had never liked him much anyway. She would just say it was his own fault. The only person he could confide his pain in was his old friend, Sam. Kevin dialed his number and said briefly, Sam, we need to talk. Half an hour later, they were sitting in a quiet bar on the outskirts of the city. Sam, a sturdy man with a serious gaze, had known Kevin for many years. He immediately understood something was wrong. "Tell me," he said, placing a beer in front of his friend. Kevin told him everything, from Sarah's strange behavior to the photos with Leo Maxwell. His voice trembled with anger at times, then broke with grief. Sam listened silently, letting his friend vent. "I want to end all this," Kevin finished, "but I don't know how. Victor, he complicates everything." Sam nodded, taking a sip from his mug. "Are you sure you want to deal with this right now? Maybe you should gather more evidence." "She might deny everything." "I already have everything I need," Kevin replied. "The pictures, her messages. What else?" Sam paused, considering his friend's words. "Listen, Kev, I know you're angry, but you have to be careful. If you lose it now, things might not go the way you want. You need to handle this smartly." These words made Kevin think. He realized Sam was right. The emotions tearing him apart right now could become his enemy. He had to think not only about himself, but also about Victor. "All right, I'll wait," he said quietly. "But she won't get away with this easily." Returning home late that evening, Kevin found Sarah already asleep. He stood in the bedroom doorway, watching her breathe softly. There was no trace of the anxiety or doubt that tormented him on her face. This was a woman living her own life, without regard for him. Kevin went into the living room and sat on the sofa, looking at the photos on the wall. Him and Victor at the cabin, family holidays, their wedding picture. It all seemed like a sham now. He took out his phone and opened the gallery. The photos taken at Leo's house screamed of betrayal. They were his weapon, his proof, but he understood that simply exposing Sarah wasn't enough. She had to feel all the pain he was experiencing now. Kevin pondered his next move: a public expose, depriving her of rights to their child, or a cold, calculated revenge that would destroy her world just as she had destroyed his. The anger in him swelled like a wave, but with it grew his resolve. He was no longer the man who tolerated lies. He knew a fight lay ahead, and he would emerge victorious. In the following days, Kevin was surprisingly calm. The internal storm that had raged within him earlier subsided, giving way to cold determination. He knew he had to act with calculation. Anger would no longer control him. Now, it would become a tool, sharp and precise. Sarah noticed a change in his behavior. If Kevin used to ask questions about her delays and try to engage her in conversations, now he seemed to ignore her. He politely answered her questions, smiled, but his eyes were like glass. She couldn't understand what he was thinking. This troubled her. "You seem different," she said one morning at breakfast. "Everything okay?" "Of course," he replied with the same, even smile. "Just a lot of work." In reality, he was busy with something else. Over the week, Kevin gathered information about Leo Maxwell. Old contacts in the legal and business spheres, which he had once made for work, now became his allies. It turned out that Leo was not only involved in questionable business schemes, but was also known for his office affairs, which no one dared to speak about openly. This knowledge became part of the plan Kevin was meticulously crafting. He decided to make not only Sarah pay, but also Leo, whose arrogance had caused the destruction of his family. Kevin started by recording Sarah's conversations. He installed a small device in their apartment that recorded everything that happened in his absence. He didn't know how soon it would yield results, but after a couple of days, listening to the recordings paid off. Sarah was talking on the phone with Kate. Her voice sounded anxious. "He's acting strange, like he knows something but isn't saying anything. Are you sure he didn't find anything?" Kate asked. "I don't know, but he looked at me in a way that gives me chills." This recording became the first stone in the foundation of Kevin's revenge. Now Sarah lived in constant anxiety, not even suspecting that her fears would soon be justified. For the next stage, Kevin turned to his friend Sam. Sam worked in security for a large company and had access to people who could dig up details about Leo's activities. Within a few days, Sam provided documents that opened Kevin's eyes to the director's true nature. Leo Maxwell used company resources for personal needs, covered up financial holes with fictitious reports, and even made shady deals with suppliers. These facts were not only violations, but also criminal offenses that could cost him his freedom. Kevin printed the documents and added them to the folder where photos of Sarah and Leo, recordings of her conversations, and screenshots of messages were already stored. This dossier became the weapon he intended to use for the decisive blow. On Friday evening, Kevin told Sarah he was going to dinner with friends and asked her not to go anywhere. For a change of scenery, Sarah, still wary, agreed to stay home. In reality, he didn't go to a restaurant but to Leo's office. A security guard stopped him at the entrance, but seeing the folder in Kevin's hands and the firm confidence in his voice, he didn't ask too many questions. Leo was surprised to see Kevin in his office. "Kevin, to what do I owe the pleasure? I came to talk about your affair with my wife," he began calmly, tossing the folder onto the table. Leo tried to joke it off, but Kevin had already opened the folder, laying out photos and documents before him. Leo's confidence quickly vanished. His face turned pale when he saw the evidence of his schemes. "What do you want?" he asked, trying to maintain a semblance of calm. "It's simple." Kevin leaned back in his chair. "You disappear from our lives. You quit your job, end your relationship with my wife, and forget about us. If you try to contact her or resume your dealings, I'll send all this to the prosecutor's office and to your wife." Leo remained silent for a long time, then nodded. He had no choice. When Kevin returned home, Sarah was waiting for him in the living room. Her face expressed tension. "We need to talk," she said as soon as he entered. "You're right," he replied. He took out the folder and placed it on the table. Sarah didn't understand at first, but when she opened it, her hands started shaking. You spied on me?" Her voice broke. "I sought the truth," he said calmly. "And you know what? Now I understand who you've become." Sarah tried to make excuses, but Kevin interrupted her. "I filed for divorce. You can pack your things." Her face turned white. She wanted to say something, but he raised his hand. "Don't say anything more. You had your chance. You destroyed it." Kevin went into the bedroom, leaving Sarah in the living room, alone with her fears. He knew this was only the first act of his revenge. Now his main goal was to rebuild his life and protect his son. Sarah didn't yet know this was only the first step toward her downfall. Sarah woke up completely alone. Kevin, as had become usual lately, had left early without a word. The house felt cold and empty, a feeling that chilled her to the bone. She remembered last night, the folder with the evidence, his cold stare, his words. "You can pack your things." It was all like a nightmare from which she couldn't awaken. "This can't be true," she whispered, sitting on the edge of the bed. In desperation, Sarah dialed her friend Kate's number, who, as always, answered quickly. "Kate, it's over," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "Kevin knows everything. He found everything. Photo, message, everything." On the other end of the line, Kate paused, then replied with slight irritation. "I warned you. But don't worry, men often bluff. Maybe he just wants to scare you." "No, Kate, he's serious. He said he filed for divorce." "Well then, get ready. But you need to keep it together. If he really goes to court, make sure he can't take your son away from you." These words sparked a new anxiety in Sarah. Her son, Victor. She couldn't let Kevin deprive her of her right to be a mother. She tried to calm herself, repeating that she would find a way to fix the situation. Meanwhile, Kevin was finalizing preparations for his next move. He had managed to reach an agreement with Leo Maxwell's company management. He handed them the dossier on the director, which included not only personal relationships with an employee, but also evidence of financial fraud. The meeting was short. Management reacted instantly to the presented facts. Leo was summoned for a discussion, and within a few hours, he left the office with a termination notice. This was the first major blow Kevin dealt his enemy. One more move, he thought on his way home. But his main target remained Sarah. Kevin knew that destroying her social and family status would be harder. He wasn't going to limit himself to a quiet divorce. Her betrayal deserved a public expose that would serve as a lesson not only for her, but also for those who might choose to follow her path. That Friday, Sarah's office was hosting a corporate party, an employee appreciation night. It was the perfect moment for Kevin. He had arranged with one of the company's technical specialists to broadcast a short video during the event. Sarah, as always, was impeccably dressed. Her dress accentuated her figure, and makeup concealed the traces of sleepless nights. She felt confident, having decided she could hide her anxieties. The evening began as usual. Toasts, music, dancing. Sarah even started to think she might return to her former life. But everything changed when the lights in the hall dimmed, and the screen displayed the words, "Sarah and Leo Maxwell, a success story." Photos flashed on the screen. Her with a glass in her hand at Leo's house, messenger chats with ambiguous hints, their walk in the woods. A murmur filled the hall. People whispered, some openly laughed. Sarah froze. Her heart beat so loudly it seemed everyone could hear it. She searched for Leo with her eyes, but he was already gone. He had been fired earlier and hadn't even come to the party. "This is some kind of mistake," she shouted, trying to be heard over the hubbub. "Who did this?" The only response was the laughter of her colleagues and some sarcastic applause. Kevin stood in the corner of the hall, watching everything from the sidelines. He knew it was a cruel move, but there wasn't a shred of pity in him. When Sarah returned home, Kevin met her. He had already packed her suitcases, which stood by the entrance. "Kevin, please, listen to me," she began. But his gaze was like ice. "I've already heard everything, Sarah. Everything I needed to know, I saw with my own eyes. Now you're leaving." She tried to talk about their son, but Kevin cut her off. "You'll only be able to see Victor through the court. You betrayed not only me, but him too. You have no place in this house." Sarah cried, begging for a second chance, but Kevin was adamant. He opened the door and gestured for her to leave. When the door closed behind Sarah, Kevin felt a strange sense of relief. It was the end of a chapter in his life, one he had concluded as he saw fit. New challenges awaited him, but he knew one thing for sure. He would no longer allow anyone to destroy what was important to him. Sarah stood before the door of their house, clutching the handles of her suitcases as if they could prevent her life from falling apart. Inside, everything seethed: grief, anger, shame. She turned to Kevin, hoping to see even the slightest glimmer of sympathy, but his face remained stone. "Kevin, please, let me explain. I made a mistake, I understand, but we can fix everything. For Victor's sake." Her voice trembled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Fix it," Kevin said with a bitter smile. "Sarah, this isn't a mistake. This is your choice. You chose Leo, you chose lies, you chose deceit. Now you have to live with that choice." She wanted to object, but he raised his hand, signaling the conversation was over. "Your things are packed. The court will decide how you see your son." With these words, he closed the door in her face. It was the sound of the end, a sound that echoed in her heart. Sarah stood on the porch for a long time, disbelieving what was happening. It seemed like a bad dream from which she was about to wake. But the biting cold of the night air told a different story. She tried to gather her thoughts, but her mind was in chaos. Suddenly, her phone vibrated in her pocket. Kate's name lit up the screen. Sarah struggled to swipe her finger across it. "Where are you?" Kate's voice came through. "I saw that mess at the corporate party." "What now?" Sarah didn't know what to answer. "He kicked me out, Kate. He packed my things and said it's over," she barely managed to say. "I warned you Kevin isn't the kind of man you can play games with." Kate's voice sounded cold, "But you decided to risk it anyway." "Help me," Sarah pleaded. Kate sighed. "All right, come over to my place. I can't just leave you on the street." Sarah nodded, though Kate couldn't see her. She had no other choice. At that moment, inside the house, Kevin sat in his son's room, watching Victor sleep. It was hard for him to explain to the boy why his mother no longer lived with them. Earlier that evening, he had broached the subject cautiously. "Son, Mom won't be with us for a while, but you'll always be able to see her. We just decided to live separately." Victor was silent for a long time, his gaze fixed on his toys. Then he asked quietly, "Is it because Mom is bad?" Kevin didn't know how to answer. He didn't want to destroy the image of his mother in his son's eyes, despite everything she had done. "No, she's not bad. It's just that adults sometimes make mistakes." The boy nodded, but his eyes showed he didn't fully understand. Kevin felt something tighten in his chest. He swore to himself that he would do everything to ensure Victor didn't feel abandoned. Sarah spent the first night at Kate's, but Kate made it clear that this was temporary. "Sarah, I can support you for a while, but you need to find your own place. And think about work. After yesterday, it will be hard for you to go back to the office. Sarah understood her friend was right. Her reputation at work was ruined. Colleagues had seen the video, and it was unlikely anyone would want to associate with her. She tried calling Leo, but his number was unavailable. He was probably too busy saving his own skin. Sarah realized she was completely alone. Life didn't become easier for Kevin, but he felt he had made the right choice. He focused on work and caring for Victor. Gradually, a sense of stability returned to him. One evening, putting his son to bed, he noticed the boy looking at a photo where the three of them, Sarah, Victor, and himself, were smiling on a beach. "Do you miss Mom?" Kevin asked quietly. "A little," Victor replied. "But you'll always be with me, right?" Kevin hugged his son tightly. "Always, son. Always." Sarah tried to rebuild her life. She rented a tiny apartment on the outskirts of the city, found a low-paying job, and every day felt life becoming harder. Her meetings with Victor became rare. Kevin followed the court's decision, allowing her to see her son. But their interactions brought no joy. Victor had become distant. He answered her monosyllabically and avoided eye contact. One day, after another meeting, Sarah sat in her empty apartment, looking out the window. Her life, which had seemed so brilliant and full of opportunities, had turned into a bottomless pit. She realized she had lost everything. Kevin was right. It was her choice, and now she was living with its consequences. Sarah picked up her phone and started typing a message to Kevin. "Forgive me. I understand everything." But before finishing, she deleted the text. She knew it wouldn't change anything. Several months passed after Sarah left the house. Winter gave way to spring, but for her, time had stopped. Every morning began the same. An empty apartment, work, encounters with cold colleagues, and evenings spent in solitude. She got used to her life becoming a series of monotonous days. But sometimes, looking at family photos, she felt pain flooding her with renewed force. Sarah sat in her narrow kitchen, cupping a mug of tea. Memories of the past filled her head. How Kevin always made breakfast for Victor, how they walked in the park together, how he read fairy tales to their son at night. She realized these moments would never happen again. Her phone vibrated. A notification appeared on the screen. Court hearing scheduled for next week. It was official confirmation that her marriage to Kevin would be finally dissolved. First attempt to contact Kevin. Sarah stared at the phone screen for a long time, then dialed Kevin's number. The ringing seemed endless. Finally, he answered, his voice even but cold. "Sarah, what's wrong?" "Kevin," she began uncertainly. "I just wanted to talk. Maybe we could discuss everything." Silence hung on the other end of the line. "Discuss?" he repeated, his voice laced with sarcasm. "Sarah, we have nothing to discuss. The decision has been made. Please give me a chance. For Victor's sake." "For Victor's sake?" he interrupted, pain resonating in his voice. "Sarah, you only remember him when it's convenient for you. And now, excuse me, I have things to do." The call ended, leaving Sarah in a void. She looked at the phone screen, where his name was displayed, and felt everything inside her clench. The day of the court hearing was cold and gray. Sarah arrived early, dressed in a stern black suit, hoping to make an impression on the judge. Kevin, however, looked calm, his confidence only highlighting her anxiety. For an hour, lawyers discussed details: joint property, custody rights for Victor. Kevin insisted that their son stay with him, providing the court with evidence that he could offer the boy a better life. Sarah tried to object. "I love my son. He shouldn't grow up without a mother." "Ms. Petrova," the judge said, "your love is not in question, but considering the presented facts, including your current unstable financial situation and reputational problems, I am forced to agree that the child will be better off with his father." These words were a blow to her. She couldn't argue. Her past behavior had become her greatest enemy. After the court, Kevin allowed Sarah to see their son. It was their first meeting in a long time, and she hoped she could somehow restore their connection. Victor sat on a park bench, playing with a toy car. Sarah approached and sat beside him, her heart aching at how much he had changed in these months. "Hello, my boy," she said softly. Victor looked up, glanced at her, and smiled uncertainly. Mom. She tried to start a conversation, asking about school, about friends, but the boy answered in monosyllables. Finally, she asked, "Do you miss me?" He was silent for a long time before quietly replying, "Dad says you miss me too. Is that true?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I miss you very much, Victor. Very much." She reached out to stroke his head, but he flinched slightly. That gesture was like a knife to her heart. Sarah realized that her place in her son's life was now questionable. After the meeting, Kevin took Victor home. The boy asked him, "Dad, will Mom come back?" Kevin was silent for a long time, choosing his words carefully. "Mom and I decided it's better if she lives separately, but she loves you, and you'll always be able to see her." Victor nodded, but didn't ask any more questions. Kevin looked at his son and understood that their life was different now. He began to notice how Victor was maturing, how he was learning to cope with changes. Kevin himself felt his pain subsiding with each day, giving way to new hope. Soon, he met a woman who worked as a teacher at Victor's school. Her name was Olivia, and she was kind, caring, and sincere. She didn't ask unnecessary questions about his past, but was simply there for him. Sarah returned to her empty apartment. She looked out the window, watching people hurry about their business, and realized her life had stopped. She had lost not only her husband and son, but also herself. She wanted to write another message to Kevin, but, like before, she deleted the text without even starting it. It was clear to her now, her repentance wouldn't change anything. She had lost everything that mattered, and she could only blame herself. Sarah realized she would have to start all over again, but this time, completely alone. Spring had firmly established itself, filling the city with the sounds of awakening nature. For Kevin, this time became a symbol of a new beginning. After months of grueling proceedings, he finally felt his life settling into a calm rhythm. The house, once a battlefield, now became a place of warmth and comfort. Kevin and Victor spent evenings together, playing board games, reading books, and watching movies. Their bond grew stronger than ever. But even so, the past sometimes made itself known. Kevin saw Victor looking sad at times. One day, he approached his father and asked, "Dad, come on, be with us too?" Kevin knelt before him, looking into his son's eyes. "Victor, Mom and I did everything to make you happy. She will always be your mom, but sometimes adults make mistakes that prevent them from being together." The boy thought for a moment, then nodded. "I understand." These words were like a final punctuation mark in their conversation. Victor didn't bring up the topic again, and Kevin felt they were both starting to move on. For Sarah, however, every day was like the last. Her life turned into a series of monotonous actions. Work, rare meetings with friends who were increasingly distant, and the emptiness of her home. After the divorce, she began to notice how her world had shrunk. People who had recently called her a friend now looked at her with pity or condemnation. Friends with whom she once discussed parties now tried to avoid conversations, and colleagues stopped supporting her. One evening, returning home, Sarah met Leo Maxwell on the street. He looked nothing like before. Instead of a confident charmer, she saw a tormented man with a gray face and a hunted look. "Sarah," he began, looking at her. "Long time no see." She stopped, feeling a wave of anger rise within her. "And thank goodness for that," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Leo tried to start a conversation, but Sarah interrupted him. "You ruined my life. Why are you here now?" "Sarah, I didn't want to," he began, but she was already walking away, not looking back. This encounter made her think. She realized she herself had chosen a destructive path, trading her family for an illusion of happiness. Meanwhile, Kevin spent more and more time with Olivia, Victor's teacher. Their relationship developed slowly, with respect for each other's past. Olivia turned out to be a caring, kind, and sincere woman who wasn't afraid of complexities. One day, as they were walking in the park, Olivia asked, "Do you think you'll ever be able to trust again?" Kevin stopped and looked at her. "It's hard to say. I was sure nothing could destroy my family. But now I know that trust isn't a given. It has to be earned." Olivia nodded, taking his hand. "I'm ready to earn it if you let me." These words were unexpected, but pleasant for Kevin. He realized that for the first time in a long time, he felt free from the past. Sarah couldn't accept that her life was ruined. After much thought, she decided to try to mend her relationship with Kevin. She knew it would be difficult, but she thought he might forgive her for the sake of their shared past. "Kevin, let's meet. I want to talk." His reply came a few minutes later. "We have nothing more to talk about." These words were like a blow, but she decided not to give up. A few days later, she came to his house. Kevin opened the door, surprised by her visit. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" His voice was cold but polite. "Kevin, give me one more chance. For Victor. I understand everything. I'm ready to fix everything." Her voice trembled, and her eyes filled with tears. Kevin looked at her for a long time. "Sarah, you're too late," he finally said. "I gave you a chance to be part of our family. You destroyed it. Now I can't trust you again. But for our son's sake," she began, but he interrupted. "For our son's sake, I will always take care of him. But you are no longer part of our family." He closed the door, leaving her alone on the porch. For Kevin, this conversation was the final farewell to the past. He felt he could now move forward without looking back. Sarah, returning home, realized she would have to start life from scratch. She had lost her family, the respect of colleagues and friends, and even herself. Her loneliness became a reminder that choices made in the past have consequences. But somewhere deep inside, Sarah hoped that one day her life would find new meaning. She didn't yet know what this path would be, but she understood there was no turning back. A year after Sarah left the house, Kevin and Victor's life had changed beyond recognition. The difficult months of pain and doubt were behind them, replaced by stability and new prospects. Each of them had found their place in the world, free from deceit and disappointment. On a spring morning, Kevin sat at the kitchen table, watching Victor pack his backpack. The boy had become more confident, smiled more often, and surprised his father with his independence. "We have a museum trip today," Victor announced joyfully. And then Ms. Thompson promised to tell us about the new exhibits. Kevin smiled. Olivia had not only become an excellent teacher for his son, but also held a special place in their lives. Their relationship developed gradually, but with each passing day, it grew stronger. "Okay, son, listen carefully and don't forget to write down anything interesting," he said, patting the boy on the shoulder. After Victor left for school, Kevin sat down at the computer to check his email. Among business letters and court notifications, he noticed one from an unknown sender. The letter was from Sarah. "Kevin, I'm writing to tell you that I've realized my mistakes. This year has been the hardest of my life. I lost you, Victor, and everything that made me happy. I understand I deserve this, but I want you to know I sincerely regret it. If you ever have time, I'd be glad to talk. I know I can't fix anything, but it's important to me that you hear my words. Sarah." Kevin stared at the screen for a long time. His fingers involuntarily clenched into a fist. This letter was a late reminder of the past he had left behind. A few days later, Kevin decided to meet with Sarah. They agreed to meet at a cafe where they used to enjoy breakfast. Sarah arrived early, nervously fiddling with a napkin. She looked tired, her face pale, but a glimmer of hope shone in her eyes. Kevin entered, sat opposite her, and waited silently for her to begin. "Thanks for coming," she said quietly. "I came to hear what you want to say," he replied curtly. Sarah swallowed, her voice trembling as she began to speak. "I wanted to thank you for everything you did for me, for Victor, even when I didn't appreciate it. I lost everything, and I have no one to blame but myself." She paused, looking at him as if expecting an answer. But Kevin remained silent, his gaze cold but calm. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I ask you for only one thing. Let me be a part of Victor's life. I want him to know that I love him." Kevin looked at her for a long time. Her voice genuinely conveyed remorse, but he knew that wasn't enough. "Sarah, you're right. Forgiveness isn't something you can get just by asking. It's something you have to earn, and not from me, but from Victor." She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I'll do everything to earn his trust. We'll see," he replied curtly, getting up. "But remember, I won't let you destroy his life again." Sarah gradually began to rebuild her relationship with her son, but it wasn't easy. Victor treated her warily, as if afraid she would disappear again. Her path to regaining trust was long and arduous. Meanwhile, Kevin felt his life taking on new meaning. He spent more and more time with Olivia, and their relationship grew stronger. She became not only a teacher, but also a friend of Victor, and for Kevin, a person with whom he could build a future. One evening, as they were walking in the park, Olivia stopped and looked at him. "Did you ever think that after everything that happened, you could be happy again?" Kevin smiled, looking at her. "I didn't just think it. I know it." And at that moment, he understood. The past no longer held him back. He had left it behind to live on. For Sarah, life continued. She rented a small apartment closer to Victor's school to be near her son. Gradually, they began to communicate more often, but their relationship was still cool. Sometimes, in the evenings, she would open an old photo album and look at pictures where the three of them were smiling against the backdrop of the sea or a holiday table. These photos were a reminder of what she had lost through her own fault. But along with this, a faint hope lived within her. She knew she could never bring back the past, but she believed she could become better for herself and for Victor. Life put everything in its place. Kevin found peace and happiness in a new chapter of his life, while Sarah learned a hard but necessary lesson. Each of them paid their price. He, with pain and betrayal. She, with loneliness and repentance. But justice prevailed, leaving everyone their place in the story they wrote with their own hands.